The youth of today probably don't know about it.
When you're young, you always think it won't happen to you. It can't possibly happen to my husband.
It was so unnecessary.
When something's really that horrible, you sort of blank it out.
It was the halcyon years.
It didn't get any better, it couldn't get any better.
Tom Pryce was something very unusual in Formula One. He was a Welshman.
Now he's on pole position. It's Tom Pryce now leading.
I did say to him, does it frighten you?
You knew what the risks were.
The attitudes to death were different.
Of all the sightings off the coast of North Wales, this is one of the rarest. And it's been a long time since one has been seen here. The Shadow DN8. £500,000 of Formula One racing car. In the 1970s, only the most brilliant and bold would dare drive these machines. Some came to the track with their egos on their sleeve, and some came backed by money and ambition. But in the midst of the swirl of petroleum and testosterone, there was one driver who stood apart.
He was always known as Malvern. Even his parents called him Malvern. Living in Denby, you could hear him about 3 miles away in his minivan because you could tell it was flat out all the way, never braked on any corner. Tom could take a corner 5 miles an hour faster than the rest of us. He shone even then, but he was very, very modest, in capital letters. Very, very shy and reserved, I think, is a better word.
By day, Tom worked as a tractor mechanic, but he had ambitions to be driving something a lot faster. And at the age of 19, he signed up to a motor racing school.
I started in March last year, came down the course, and I had my first race in September at Brands Hatch.
This is a sort of beginner's course?
Yes, that's it, yes. And I just became interested that way.
6 or 8 pupils from the motor racing school were to race. And he said, I'm going to win this, he said to me. And I thought, phew, that was quite confident, but it rained, and he was superb in the rain. And of course, he won that competition by a country mile. That was the beginning of his passion for motor racing.
Well, you've now won for yourself a £1,500 Lola Formula Ford racing car as a result of your recent success at Silverstone, together with 12 months sponsorship. How much difference is all this going to make to you?
Well, it means that I won't have to pay for my racing as much as I did before, and it means I'll get more regular drives and visit different tracks, and there'll be a better chance altogether.
Tom's passion was now a profession. He would be racing against the best young drivers in Europe.
To begin with, he wasn't particularly distinguished, let's say, so much so that when he was racing in the club events, his father, Jack, had trouble recognising him, which is why the famous 5 black stripes came up, because he just taped them onto Tom's helmet so that he could identify his son.
entrants prepare for the Formula 3 meeting held at the world-famous Liddon circuit in Kent.
I knew nothing about Tom Pryce until I went to a Formula 2 race at Mallory Park. It was the first race of the 1971 season, and we ostensibly went to see Formula 2 cars. But there was a supporting race for sports cars called F100.
Fundamentally, the F100, named after the successful radial tyre, is a two-seater sports car powered by engines of not more than 1300 cc.
And we were suddenly struck by this one car that was being driven with such energy sideways. The guy had tremendous skill, whoever he was. But we knew he had a white helmet with black stripes, and he finished second and he set the fastest lap. And then we heard his name was Tom Pryce.
Tom's flamboyant driving style was beginning to turn heads. But that style was a world away from the man behind the wheel.
I met Thomas in a kind of nightclub where he came and asked me to dance, and he hated dancing, absolutely hated it, so he must have summoned up his courage. He just said he was in the car business, and I just thought we must be selling cars. He didn't tell me any more than that. And one day we were in his car one evening going somewhere, and the local radio station had this thing about the race on the next day, and they said, "We've got Tom Pryce racing." I said, "Oh, that's you." He said, "Well, yes, it is, actually."
Well, what is it you're really aiming for?
Well, I'm aiming for the top, I hope. That's Formula 1, but I hope to go up the Formula step by step. I'd like to go up the hard way because it'll help to get more experience and things like that, you know.
I think the thing that stood out for everybody was extraordinary car control. Probably he shouldn't have been as good as he was at that level.
They're always moving from Formula 3 in those days into Formula 1, whoever can do that. And it's very rare air in Formula 1, so it's very difficult to get into that group, so to speak. Tom was an exceptional driver, and he totally justified the fact of being taken from Formula 3 and getting into Formula 1.
This was the golden era of Formula 1, when the giants of the racing world, James Hunt, Niki Lauda and Emerson Fittipaldi, were all battling to become world champion.
All these ladies that we've seen you with this year.
It's been jolly heavy going.
They were glamorous, colourful and exciting years. It was, I think, even more glamorous than it is now, because more people came into the paddock area, the film stars, the rock and rollers. I think it was more colourful then. It was certainly more dangerous. The tensions were higher because there was more big accidents happening. The racetracks didn't have anything like the safety facilities that exist today.
You knew what the risks were. You knew that at any point in any race you could find yourself in a very difficult situation, which could end up tragically.
It was the halcyon years in one respect, but on the other respect, so many people were dying and you were so close to them that that wasn't a very nice experience.
Tom began his F1 career with a newly formed token racing team. He had shown promise at the lower levels, but now was a small fish in a big pond.
Tom Pryce was something very unusual in Formula 1. He was a Welshman, and there haven't been many of those. He was a nice chap, a modest chap, and they're not all that way. He was a driver who was on his way up.
Because he went up so quickly, he hadn't had the experience that a lot of others had. What he wanted to do was drive. He would have done it without being paid. He was a very determined character. And I think that's what got him to where he was, because when he set his mind on something, like he was going to be a Grand Prix driver and he wanted to get to the top, you know, if he was in a race, if he started at the back of the grid, he would be fighting right till the end of that race. He'd never say, "Oh, it's not worth it." A lot of drivers would have stopped, sort of given up, "Oh, it's not worth it, no point fighting, I'm right at the back, I'm never going to get to the front." But he always battled on, always.
Like every young driver who comes in, everybody's kind of looking sideways to begin with. Has he got enough experience to be driving a car of that power? Is he going to make too many mistakes? Is he going to get too excited? Tom seemed to settle in very quickly, and I think a lot of people saw him as a star to be.
For all Tom's skill, he was still a raw talent in F1, and in his third race in Monaco, he was deemed too inexperienced to take part.
The old red mist come down over Tom's eyes a bit because he transferred to the Formula 3 race at Monaco, and he absolutely slaughtered the opposition. And that fixed it as far as Formula 1 was concerned. He was a man to watch.
Talent could only take you so far in F1. After just 4 months with Token, Tom was snapped up by another of the smaller teams, Shadow Racing. His life was about to change forever. Shadow Racing was an underdog, competing in a world of giants. They were racing against the biggest teams in the business, Ferrari, McLaren, and Lotus. But no matter which team you raced for, the drivers faced a bigger challenge.
These were a very dangerous car. Modern cars, they've got crash zones, they're carbon fibre chassis. Your feet are in front of the front wheels. You are really just surrounded by fuel and aluminium in this, and that's it. That is your safety. And you know, a very fast car. Any time they got hit, the driver got doused in fuel. Generally, the whole thing went up. So there's a lot of drivers were being succumbed by fire. This part of the car really is just nothing. It's just a piece of fiberglass. And if you look here, the only structure between your feet and the barrier would be this oil cooler. They needed the performance, so they needed to sit the driver as far forward as possible to get the weight distribution of the car correct. So as soon as you hit anything, you tended to break your legs, your ankles, or anything like that. There's no consideration for safety for the driver. It was just all about performance. A great fun thing to drive, very exhilarating. The feedback from the car is fantastic, a very pure racing car.
Once he got into the Shadow team, I think that was a team he felt very comfortable in. He liked the personnel on that team. And that then allowed him to go out on track and drive the wheels off his car.
He did the Dutch and French Grand Prix and qualified sensationally. He was third on the grid. First corner, he had a shunt with James Hunt. So his career in a top-line team kind of got off to a bit of an exciting start. But straight away into the right kind of car, Tom showed that he had the potential to get the job done.
I just loved watching him sliding the car because he just loved doing it. It was a joy to him. It was a joy to us to watch. But he had such phenomenal control that I can name any number of places where Casino Square at Monte Carlo, for example, and coming out of there in the shadow, sideways like this, the barrier over here, just kissing it, because he wanted it to do it. That wasn't the car got out of control and he's catching it. It was out of control because he wanted it to be out of control, and that was such confidence in himself, in his ability.
Despite driving an inferior car, Tom was now starting to turn heads on the biggest of stages.
Certainly the biggest crowd I've ever seen at Brands Hatch, and what all the people had come to see was what was on paper at any rate looked like being the finest British Grand Prix of all time. Brilliant newcomer from Wales, Tom Pryce, with the latest Shadow DN3 number 16. And he was the man who won 100 bottles of champagne for the fastest practice on Thursday morning in the very first session of practice.
He gave all the champagne away. All the friends and people around, here's 6 bottles for you, 6 bottles for you.
And it's Lauder leading. There's Emerson. There's Tom Pryce well up, showing that his practice time in the Shadow was not just a flash in the pan, this brilliant Welsh newcomer to the field.
The biggest problem here, in fact, is to keep the car on the road. Or, of course, there's somebody on the grass
Tom
there.
Pryce,
Tom Pryce going wide on the grass there.
Number 3, there's the checkered flag, and Jody Scheckter wins for Tyrrell.
In Tom's maiden British Grand Prix, he finished 8th, and in the following race in Germany, he won his first points of his career.
Thomas was always up the front, even in a car that wasn't competitive. He wanted to become world champion, and he was sure he could do it, and I was sure he could do it as well.
In March the following year, Tom returned to Brands Hatch to compete in the non-championship Formula One Race of Champions. But as the heavens opened, it was Tom who started in pole position.
There we go.
He had the advantage, but now he would need the race of his life.
Taking the lead in number 6, the Black John Player Special of Jackie Hicks. Close behind in the Tyrrell 007 is number 3, the young South African Jody Scheckter.
And to beat Scheckter would be no easy task. He was the reigning champion on this track.
Tom Pryce in a Shadow Ford. He's chasing the South African. Tom Pryce takes second. He's moving up. Then, tragedy for the South African. Just as Scheckter seems to have the race all sewn up, he goes into the pits on lap 26. Tom Pryce in his Shadow Ford, number 16, takes over. That's how it stays at the end of the Race of Champions. Tom Pryce in his Shadow Ford takes the checkered flag.
Finally, after just 11 months of competing on the F1 circuit, Tom had won his first Formula One race. No Welshman had done this before.
You're now being tipped as a potential world champion.
He's got an enormous amount of natural talent, and of course every driver needs to have this.
Tom's talent was growing, and so was his confidence.
We were at this Grand Prix at Silverstone. We were in the lift going up to bed, and Nicky Lauda got in the lift, and he said to Thomas, well, where do you think you'll be in the morning? And Thomas said, I'll be on pole position. I thought, and sure enough, he was.
Tom Pryce, who you're looking at right now with his Welsh dragon there in his helmet. Now he's on pole position. What a tremendous achievement. Tom Pryce in second place. And so it's Tom Pryce now leading the John Player Grand Prix of 1975.
For what the Shadow lacked in speed, Pryce made up for it with skill, especially in wet conditions.
It is the greatest equaliser because the car doesn't count for quite so much, and he was just so phenomenally quick.
Drivers had to vote whether they were going to race or not because it was raining. And Thomas always voted to race because he knew he was quicker than the others in the rain. He'd stand a better chance because of his natural skills.
And that skill led to another podium finish in Austria.
We were driving the best cars in the world, the fastest cars in the world. It didn't get any better, and it couldn't get any better.
Well, it's a very credible performance in the race. Tom, how do you feel about it?
Well, it's tremendous for the mechanics and the team. It's brought the morale up. They're all very happy about it, and I'm happy as well.
Tom was holding his own against the best drivers in the world. But with that success came extra attention.
He would have felt, what am I doing here, and why are these people coming up and talking to me?
He was asked to drive a car at Le Mans for a film that was being made, a film called Bobby Deerfield. It starred Al Pacino, and it was directed by Sidney Pollack. And Sidney said, well, Tom, with his American accent, we've seen the rushes, and, you know, if you want to become a film star, you've got it made. Because he was incredibly good-looking and very photogenic, and he just giggled. He wasn't in the least bit interested.
All he wanted to do was drive. He was 100% happy behind the wheel, but he did not like the bits that came with it.
We were in lunch in some little cantina somewhere, and what did Tom order? Chicken and chips. I said, for God's sake, Tom, you're in the land of the finest food in the world, and you're having bloody chicken and chips.
Is the life living up to your expectations?
Yes, I think it is. Yeah, I enjoy it, and Formula One is what I expected it to be.
But there was one thing no driver could anticipate. No matter how experienced they were.
Nicky Lauda lost control of his Ferrari on a 150-mile-an-hour curve. For Lauda, it was a race for life.
The reigning world champion had suffered horrific injuries.
He was sitting in a fire, in the middle of a fire.
It took you more than a minute to get him out, didn't it?
Yes, I would guess it'd be about that time.
Was Lauda conscious?
Yes, he was conscious most of the time.
Despite the accident, the race continued. And incredibly, Lauda would return to the championship in just 6 weeks.
I said to Thomas, what would you do if there was an accident? He said, I'd overtake and get in front if I could. And I was rather shocked. But you know that, if you're a winner, if you're out to win, if you're there to win and you're a true racer, that's what you do.
The attitude then was, if you can't take the heat, keep out of the kitchen. The throttle works both ways. And the attitudes to death were different.
On the pit lane, and look, we've had an accident, a multi-car accident, and James Hunt has spun and crashed into the other cars. He's walking out of it, Morgan's out of it, everybody's out of it, on the business there. And there's another car, Wilson Fittipaldi.
I did say to him, does it frighten you when you spin off? And he said, no, I just feel bloody angry. He wanted to win, he was out there to win, he's very competitive. When you're young, you always think you're invincible. You always think it won't happen to you. It can't possibly happen to my husband. He's going to be okay. And Thomas used to say to me, oh, it's much more dangerous on the roads than it is on the track.
Pryce would finish the season with 10 points, making it his most successful championship so far.
South African Grand Prix in Johannesburg. The battle is on for the World Drivers' Championship.
At Kyalami Racetrack, the best drivers in the world were preparing for the third Grand Prix of the season.
It was just like any normal race weekend, just on the outskirts of Johannesburg.
Marred by technical problems, the Shadow had had a poor start to the season, but as torrential weather set in, Pryce took advantage of the awful conditions.
In the rain, in practice, Tom wiped the floor with everyone. He was quicker than Lauda, Scheckter, all the hot shoes. The Shadow had been improved. They had some money in the team. Tom showed his potential by being quickest in the rain.
Despite a brilliant performance in practice, Pryce would eventually qualify in 15th on the starting grid.
It's one of the most dramatic places to watch a start that I can think of, because the grid was just over the crest of the hill. It was about half a mile away, and you were looking straight ahead, and you could hear the cars on the grid, you could hear them revving up, and then suddenly the field would be released, and over they'd come. And you'd get the cars going like this, seesawing, weaving for position to get to the right braking spot for the first corner. I mean, it was so spectacular. We did note that Tom, for some reason, had made a bad start, and he was at the back of the field, and we didn't know why. But we were watching Tom's progress coming through the field, and he was picking off the back markers one after the other, and it was good to watch.
So Tom would have been doing about 175, 176 miles an hour, and there was a rise, and it dropped off to go downhill to the first corner called Crowthorne at the end of the straight.
Now, in those days, there wasn't the computer coverage that you've got now. You had to stand outside the circuit and keep a lap chart if you wanted to follow the progress of the race. And Crowthorne was a good place to do it because, as I say, it was the first corner, it was the end of the long straight. The cars would come over the brow, down past the pits, down to you, through this corner and away, and you could see a lot of the circuit. Great place to watch.
Renzo Zorzi was Tom's teammate. Zorzi had a problem with the metering unit on his car and ended up stopping opposite the pits. And wisps of smoke came out of the car.
And it started to catch fire. A fire marshal tried to run across the track to reach the car on fire. When you're in a Formula One car like this one here, you're extremely low. So while you're going up a hill and it's coming to a crest, Tom probably had no idea at all that this young man had started to run across the track. He would have died instantly, I fear. Fire extinguisher hit the head of Tom Pryce. The fire marshal died in the accident as well. The fire extinguisher itself, when it hit Tom's crash helmet, The fire extinguisher went right over the grandstand and landed on top of a car in the car park.
We suddenly were aware that Tom's shadow was coming down the track and it was banging against the wall as it came down. And his car hits Jacques Lafitte's car, and the next thing we see is the shadow going up in the air briefly, coming our way. And the next thing I remember was the most almighty thud against the bank. There was actually sleepers that the car hit. One glance told you that all was not well with Tom. I mean, it was a shocking sight.
The British motor racing driver Tom Pryce has been killed in a crash which also killed the South African track marshal. Pryce, who came from North Wales, was 27 and had raced in over 40 other Grand Prix.
I was watching the rugby Wales were playing, and it came on that he'd been killed. He died so young, and it was so unnecessary.
I was just completely numb, didn't they? I just couldn't. It was devastating, completely devastating. I just couldn't believe it had happened. I was in the pits when he got into the car. I wished him luck and everything, and then I just never saw him again. That's not seeing someone again. It makes it really hard to accept that they've gone.
You still just couldn't believe that such a thing could have happened, and that such a talented guy had been taken out just like that.
The collision between Tom's car and 19-year-old Frederik Janssen van Vuren had happened on the 22nd lap of a 78-lap race. Niki Lauda would take the checkered flag, but it was a bittersweet victory. Tom was buried at St. Bartholomew's Church in Kent. It was just 2 years after he had married Nella there.
Tom Pryce, he was a driver who was on his way up.
An honest young man, driven by a dream.
All he wanted to do was drive.
When I was young, never saw the truth.
He was the man I fell in love with, and he fell in love with me, and that was the way it went.
Tom was an exceptional driver.
He had such phenomenal control. He was just supremely gifted.
He always battled on, always. To me, he'll always be that devastatingly handsome young man, because he hasn't got older.
Tom Pryce died at the age of 27. He remains the only Welsh driver to have ever won a Formula One race.
I have absolutely no hesitation in saying that I believe Tom could have been a world champion.
Next Thursday at 10:35, a profile of Newport heavyweight boxer David Pearce, and the first programme on Chris Hallam is available on BBC iPlayer.